Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of CoT Lorecast. I'm here with just Bromms tonight,
Yes, hello.
and we are going to be discussing a topic we previously thought we were going to do 2 weeks ago, but we're doing it now, better late than never, Mad King Thorn.
We just wanted to time it more closely to Halloween, that's all. It's all in the plan.
Yeah, and actually, based on the release schedule of when this should be coming out, it will actually be right as he's arriving in Lion's Arch and Guild Wars 2.
Dun, dun,
I
dun.
believe, if it's the 30th, which I thought is what it said. But it might be the 30th at midnight, so, whatever.
Ah.
Doesn't matter. So, it also works out in our favor because we've had some time to experience the Halloween content as it is, here in Guild Wars 2, to see if we got any real new information regarding Mad King Thorn. And we didn't get too much, we focused more on the Bloody Prince, the Mad King Thorn's son, but we did get a pretty interesting short story about Mad King Thorn, and you get to see some dialogue back and forth between him and his son in the Mad Realm, if you happen to go in there at all. So, but I guess to start, we should just kind of talk about Mad King Thorn and Halloween's of Guild Wars past, things like that, because there's been what initially started off in the original in Guild Wars 1 way back in 2005. He was basically just a guy who showed up on Halloween, and he had a little finale, and they redecorated a lot of the different areas, the key areas, Lion's Arch and Draknor's Forge. I think that might have been it for their first Halloween, and he gave, he had silly, corny jokes, which is kind of what he's known for. And that was more or less it, really. And then things really kind of started to get rolling. By the time we had next Halloween, we had Alona as well. And we got to see that in Alona, they celebrate Halloween, but they don't in Cantha, which was kind of interesting. And then we start to get more and more little tidbits of information here and there through different missions and updated wikis and things that tell us more about Mad King Thorn, about who he is, and what kind of makes him tick. So, I guess to start, Mad King Thorn, or Oswald Thorn, he was a former king of Kryta. I don't think we actually know what time frame he was king, which is something I was thinking about.
I think
Right.
it says on the wiki that his tyranny, like when I think he was killed around 825 AE.
Yeah, actually,
So
I just saw that. So yeah. So never mind. We do have a time frame of when he was, when he ruled, but I'm not sure where that falls within the Crichton family timeline.
yeah, we don't know when it started. So I mean, he was
True,
probably what, like 30 or 40, because he had a son that was, well, maybe older actually. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know because his family life is a little interesting, to say the least. So we did actually, funny enough, we've known about Mad King Thorn for so long. We actually learned that he had an older brother just this past year in Guild Wars 2 through the kind of scavenger hunt mission that we had, where we were running around collecting pieces of the book. And we don't know too much about his brother, but you get this from obtaining one piece of the back piece from last year. And it says, let's see. Prince Ewan Thorne was the elder brother of Oswald Thorne. He was kind and popular, refused to believe terrible things others said about his brother. He truly cared for his younger brother. However, his naivete proved to be his undoing when young Oswald tricked Ewan into being devoured by a giant spider in order to take his place as heir to the throne. Despite this, in ghost form, Ewan still seems to care for his brother, asking the player to let Oswald know that he's okay.
That's a pretty good setup into the personality of who we're dealing with.
Yeah. Do you wanna talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, he, I don't know if you want to go as far to say he was crazy, but he was definitely diabolical. Um, did he kill all of his eight wives, or did he just go through? He went through eight wives. I don't think it describes exactly what happened to them.
We know a couple of them, I believe. We actually, again, that kind of works into Lady Lyrica was one that we learned about. Or she was actually, I don't think she was she actually married to him before I. Oh no, okay, it was his first wife. We actually that was another character that we encountered in Halloween 2012 in Guild Wars 2, um, as a ghost in Kessex Hills, I believe. Uh, she had a servant named Tina who was murdered by Oswald for defending her. She was in love with his brother, but her hopes for a future with him were dashed when Oswald murdered him. Uh,
Yeah.
Oswald knew she loved his brother, and because of this, he wanted her for his own. He won her over with lies and false promises, but once they were married, he dropped the farce and she saw him for what she truly was. He had her assassinated by brigands.
Right.
So that was his first wife, Lady Lyrica.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, he was just a pretty bad guy all around. His subjects hated him. He uh, he basically just had people executed at his whim. It sounds like from some of the things that we've read. He left people to starve during a drought that had hit Kryta. Yeah, I mean, just we've all heard stories about like European kings and queens that were just tyrants, and so if you take all of those stories and kind of mash them together, you get a pretty good idea of who Oswald Thorne was.
yeah, we I believe it said that he had 8 wives. I'm not
Yeah,
exactly yeah, 8 wives. His fifth wife is the only other one I think we really have a ton of information about. Not even a ton, we just have any information about, which is Zola, which is his fifth wife, who was an Istani princess, which we actually got. He mentioned her in the short story that was released as well, but we'll kind of get on that in a little while. Um, but apparently, even as a child, he enjoyed pranking and playing jokes on people, including feeding peppers to animals, something that he enjoyed doing. Um, Before being crowned, he used to play a game of Prince Oswald Says, which obviously, as he's most famous for now, became Mad King Says.
hmm
Um, we know through the story I just mentioned that he killed his brother. Apparently, he also murdered his father so that he could easily take over the throne with no competition. And kind of, I guess, one of the big things that he's known for is, again, his cruelty, but in a way, he always makes it like a joke, I guess you could say. But his Kryta was undergoing. It was during like a famine situation, so all of his subjects are dying of starvation, and he would throw huge banquets for him and all of his his courtiers. So, needless to say, that made him very unpopular with
yeah,
all of his subjects, which eventually led to an uprising. But again, when we discuss the short story in a little while, you'll see that it might not just have been this banquet. It might have also been some antagonizing from his son, Bloody Prince Edric. Um, we do know, obviously, like I said, Zola, his fifth wife, was an Istani princess, so we know, obviously, he had to have traveled to Alona at some point, and he actually uh, became friends and had altercations and fights with Joko, who at the time was an up-and-coming king in Alona, which we know, if you've played Guild Wars Nightfall, you know Joko is a lich, an undead lich, whether he was undead when the Mad King actually knew him when he was a king, uh, he was still as a king, not an undead lich commanding an undead army. I don't know if we actually know that.
do we know when Paolo Joko became a lich?
I don't think we do because there's always that kind of that same thing with Vizier Kilbron. from Guild Wars 1. How long was he a lich? Was he always a lich? Did he become a lich through some sort of weird Orient tome? And we do know that he could not be defeated, Paulo Joko. I mean, not to talk about Paulo Joko instead of Mad King Thorn, but he could not be defeated, and Tarai Asa sealed him away. And then our characters in Guild Wars Nightfall broke him out because we needed his assistance to stop Abaddon. And then after we defeated Abaddon, we just let Paulo Joko go. And since then, in 250 years in Guild Wars 2, he has built up his army again and is terrorizing Alona with an undead army because we freed an undead lich for our own means.
Yeah, we're heroes.
Yep. Enemy of my enemy is my friend, and then after that, I don't really care. So, see you later. But yeah, apparently he hates Tengu, Harpies, and Ettins, and he fears termites. He wants.
This is completely random.
Yeah, if you guys watched the most recent live stream about Halloween, they talk about Quetzalcoatl, which finally we know how to pronounce Quetzalcoatl. Who's a enemy from Alona that he had a fight with over, I believe it was about jokes, about how he was saying that he could tell better jokes than Mad King Thorn. And he had this one weird dialogue that people could translate, and said, "Why did the seer chase after the Eidolon?" And it's because time was of the essence. So that was Quetzalcoatl's joke, but Quetzalcoatl, I guess I said a person. Quetzalcoatl is this weird-looking creature thing. I don't even know what you call him.
I was gonna say it shouldn't be very difficult to top Mad King Thorn's jokes because they're all terrible. But if he's topping them with stuff like that, then I can see how it would be a fair fight. Oh, it's just awful.
Yeah, he's kind of known for his corny jokes, and that's kind of the whole Mad King says. If you don't laugh, you'll die a horrible, painful death, and then he'll resurrect you so you can try to laugh at him again. Apparently, this is another thing that we learned from Guild Wars 2. After Zola was just kind of taken hostage, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Zola married Mad King Thorn because he kidnapped her father and said, you know, she needs to marry me. Wow, I'm sorry, guys. Let me rephrase that entirely because I just totally screwed that up. He kidnapped her father and said, "You need to marry me or I will kill your father." And she married him, and then this actually led to a war between Alona and Kryta. And this is, again, Sea Marshal Bennu is the person that we actually met in Guild Wars 2 as a ghost. And he didn't have too much to say. He was one prickly barnacle, that Oswald Thorne. I opposed his marriage to my daughter and would have attacked Lion's Arch to get her back. The salty conniver kidnapped me. He threatened to kill me if Zola didn't marry him. She believed him, and as did I. So to save my life, she agreed to be his queen. Once they were married, he set me free, but the tables were turned. I could take no action against him because he had my daughter in his clutches until he tired of her. I'll never forget the day I got the news. In anger, Thorne had ordered her tied to the stake and burned. Within the hour, I had ordered my entire fleet to his doorstep. Never have I lost a more satisfying war. So that was Sea Marshal Bennu, the father of Zola, his fifth and supposedly his favorite wife. But not too favorite because in a fit of anger, he burnt her at the stake.
Yeah.
You know. Let's see. What else do we have?
I think my favorite one, I say that very delicately because was he had a wife that he put her in a coffin and filled it with rats and then threw it into the ocean. Like, all right, sounds good.
Yeah. So, I guess the only other little tidbit we have into his childhood is he did have a childhood friend named Samson. Again, someone else we met in the scavenger hunt in Guild Wars 2. And when they were playing Samson was grabbed by a giant worm, and Oswald ran away to leave him to die.
Classy.
So there you go. So to move on a little bit further, again, 1825 is when his rule ended, when an enraged mob stormed the castle. We were led to believe initially that all of his members had left, all of the members of his court, but we actually learned through the short story that a few of his members were around before the mob stormed the castle, but that kind of ended with him, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So, since most of his staff was gone, the mob stormed the castle and killed him with a carving knife. And again, the best thing we have, the only description, is the mob was said to have been very creative with his corpse, having it cut up afterwards. And then after he was murdered and chopped up, all of his possessions and everything were set on fire.
They also took his different body parts and put them in different boxes so they could. They basically buried them in different places across Tyria so that no one could use magic to bring him back.
Yes, and that actually will tie in a second when we talk about the Lunatic Court and their attempts to resurrect Mad King Thorn. But I did want to mention that he is considered a spirit and often referred to as a spirit lord, and he lives in his own little section of the underworld called the Mad Realm. And no one's really sure why he has his own section of the underworld where he can just kind of rule over and do what he wants. But you get to actually go into it in the later years of Guild Wars 1, and we also get to go into it now in Guild Wars 2. But he kind of just rules over this little section of the underworld, and seems to have, at least Guild Wars 2 anyway, candy corn and plastic spiders and all sorts of Mad King Thorn things. And he's sealed here in the Mad Realm, except for one day a year, which is Halloween. And we're also not really sure why he's able to break free that one day a year. Perhaps the lore reason is the barrier between the mists is weakened on that day, and that allows him to then break through the barrier into the mortal world for just a day, where in Guild Wars 1 time, he would just kind of have a grand old party, and everyone would play Mad King Says with him, and if you, did what he said, when Mad King Says, you would get a treat, and if you didn't, you would die a horrible death. And he would show up every 3 hours and do this, and at the end of that, you would get a Halloween hat, and everybody loved that, and that was pretty much the main Mad King Thorn interaction. Now, there were other quests and things that were added to the game that dealt with, that had to do with Mad King Thorn, but you dealt mostly with his heralds and things like that afterwards, not actually him directly, because he was only ever there on Halloween. And again, I guess I should say, he was trapped. There was an indeterminate amount of seals at this point that are keeping the Mad King locked away in the Mad Realm. Now, the Lunatic Court, which we learn are his diehard followers, in life and after death, are attempting to break these seals to allow him to break free from the Mad Realm and walk the mortal world all year as opposed to just one day a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we know one seal was broken through the events of Guild Wars Beyond, which the first section of that was the War in Kryta, and what our player characters did in the War in Kryta was we put Salma back on the throne. Queen Salma being of the original bloodline of King Doric, the true king of Kryta, restored a true Krytan king, or royal line, I should say, to the throne that broke the first seal. And in doing so, this actually, it was the lore reason behind the introduction of the Flux in Guild Wars 1 PvP, which is kind of the flavor of the month thing, where they would add in a new kind of tweak to the way the game is played to change it up. For instance, it could be something like, if you don't have an elite skill on your skill bar, you do 50% more damage, or something like that. So the way they explained this was the seal that was broke when Salma took the throne, the battle isles being in the mists allowed more seeping of chaotic energy from the Mad Realm and Mad King Thorne's control to come in, and that allowed the flux to be altered once a month in PvP. So, see, that's again, not to get off topic, that's the kind of stuff that I wish we had more of in Guild Wars 2. Something that simple, just a little tiny lore explanation for why a mechanic like that could change. I mean,
it has potential to be very interesting, but
yeah. So that is kind of the main background from Guild Wars 1, with a little bit of Guild Wars 2 Mad King Thorn knowledge in there, I guess.
Yeah.
What else do we want to talk about him?
Well, as you mentioned before, he had a son who was, and I think was it his wife and his son that were thought to have been killed during the siege on his castle when he was killed also?
Well, I don't believe we actually know who he is the son of, like which wife, because he had 8 wives, and I think it mentioned something about a stepmother, perhaps, or maybe that was part of the dialogue in the Mad Realm itself. Right. So, I don't know, but anyway, why don't you continue on?
Yeah, well, I guess before we get to that, last year in Guild Wars 2, we, this is the first time that we had seen what the new Halloween was going to be like, and so we got to basically venture to the Mad Realm and kind of do some mini games down there. There's a big maze down there with all kinds of monsters, and there's a tower jumping puzzle and things like that. But of specific note with Mad King Thorne was that he had attempted to break through. Well, he did break through the lion and Lion's Arch and destroyed the statue to try to come back into our realm, and the players actually had to go down and fight him in his own realm to stop him from coming into Tyria.
Yes, and through watching the Guild Wars 2 live stream, and if you go to the old Shadow of the Mad King release page, the first release page on guildwars2.com, you can watch the video, the really cool spooky video where they talk about how all denizens of Guild Wars 2 think after 250 years believe the Mad King to be a myth, and just this story told to scare small children kind of a thing. And the reason that he was sealed away for these 250 years was in the events of Guild Wars 1, like I kind of mentioned. One of the events that you would get, the quest that was added later on, was you were trying to help the Lunatic Court give the Mad King a body to come back into, because as of right now he just comes back in his kind of ghost body, and he needed a physical form. So you had to go and grab random things because they knew that a ritual requires lots of knickknacks, so let's get some knickknacks. And it was things like Moa soup for the demented soul and the Mad King's left slipper and a few other random objects. Needless to say, prior to that event, I always thought that the Lunatic Court was like completely badass, and then we kind of see that they're a little goofy, which again makes sense for the Mad King.
Yeah, it fits in with his persona.
But it actually, they botched something up, and rather than breaking the Mad King free, the 3 devs on the live stream said that they essentially sealed him away for 250 years. It's a little bit odd to me that it happened to be 250 exactly, just because that fits. It would have made sense if he sealed. They screwed up a couple times, and we also again have no explanation as to why he's back. What changed? Did the Lunatic Court do something? Did his power just return? We don't really know how he was then able to break free last year.
It makes you wonder if maybe one of the other seals was broken that we just don't know about. I mean, there could have been who knows how many different events that caused that to happen, between, just even in the couple years before Guild Wars, or since we've started playing, even there's been a ton of stuff. So
Yeah, because I mean, it took in the course of however long the Lunatic Court broke the one seal by putting Salma back on her throne. 250 years passed. They could have bumbled up a lot more. They could have broke 10 seals, 50 seals. We don't know how many seals there are.
hmm
So perhaps there was just such seal being broken behind the scenes. I don't know. But I did actually want to mention there was a couple. Estrella was the name of the wife that he put in a coffin full of rats and dumped into the sea.
right.
Henrietta was another one of his wives, and she was actually murdered by Prince Edric. And then there was Edric's mother, who we don't know what her name is, but she was beheaded on Edric's birthday.
Lovely.
Yeah, so anyway, that's a pretty good setup to come back to Prince Edric.
Yeah.
So basically, the high level, Oswald thinks of him as disappointment when he tried to overthrow the Mad King, which actually turned out to be the night before I think he was murdered, when the townspeople came in and attacked him. But the best way to see this is, and again I'll link this in the description, is the short story called The Family Business. So I don't want to read the whole thing out, and again, if you want to hear it read to you, check out Wooden Potato's video where he does his story time and he reads this. But essentially we learn that there are other close members to Oswald Thorne, because we learn of Dribbin, who's the king's wizened counselor. So he actually did have people somewhat close to him. How long Dribbin lasted at this position, we don't know. But it says he's a wizened counselor, so it makes me think he's been around for a little while. Essentially, you find out that Edric broke free, and Oswald wanted to have sandwich trees. Did you read that, Bromms, by any chance?
No.
It says that it's basically, this story begins as the townspeople are starting to amass outside the castle, ready to attack. And he says, "I swore sandwich trees would have been the answer to this famine. They are complaining about the famine, right?" And Dribbin basically says, "Your endeavor to feed the populace by putting meat, cheese, and bread in the ground was a valiant one, your majesty. But this is another matter. Your son had another misadventure." So again, to the testament of the Mad King, he tried planting cheese, bread, and meat in the ground to grow sandwich trees to feed his subjects.
Sounds legit.
Now, again, this is kind of an interesting article because we learn that the Mad King does love his subjects. In his weird, peculiar way of doing things, he does deeply care for his subjects and wants to, protect them and wants their love. I mean, he has a weird way of going about doing it, but he does actually care for them in his own demented way. So basically, Edric escapes and he burned the village of Pelchalice to ashes, and that killed 600 people. And it's the 5th such slaughter this season. So again, Pelchalice, a place that we don't know where that is. Possibly just maybe it'll have some significance in the future. So let's see. Dribbin tells him they fear you've lost your mind. And he's in so Edric's in the throne room. Oswald goes to talk to him. And then, I guess he did it to try to get the love of a woman, is basically what we think. That's what Edric did. He burnt down this village to get the love of a woman. Or maybe he was scorned by a woman. And then Oswald says, "You want a woman to love you, Eddie? You take her father hostage, not murder a village. You never did pay any attention to my lessons." And then he says, "Don't call me Eddie, it's Edric or the Bloody Prince." And he's like, "Whatever. This is almost as embarrassing as when you called yourself Pain Lord, and you're not king, so get off my throne." And he says, Besides, you never know when it's your last day as king. I'm going to be king. I have to get used to this. And he says, why? But the Mad King says, why Pell Chalice? Perfectly good way to summon a mob, which you did. Never kill people unless it's part of a joke, dear boy. And Edric says, the joke is you, including the punchline. I thought you would appreciate it. And Oswald says, what's so funny about my subjects storming, or trying to storm the castle? And then this is again where we learn, originally we didn't know any of this, and this was revealed here. Edric says, because I led them here. For years you played with your subjects, made them the butt of your jokes. I decided it would be a perfect way to end your reign and start mine. I used your reputation to ignite an overthrow. And then basically Oswald's like, yeah, I've had enough of this, and jumps on top of him and says, I've skinned, burned, boiled, skewered, snapped, exsanguinated, disemboweled, stampeded, frozen, and catapulted my subjects. But each time it was part of a wonderful joke. Countryside flooded? Nail stilts to everyone's leg. Worst storm in a century? Fire flaming debris at the villages to keep them warm. I care for my subjects. You just want blood on your blade. You are grave failure as a thorn. And that's what I mean. Like, he does, he has dementia ways, but he does care for his subjects. Where it sounds like his son is just your typical sociopath that just wants to kill for the sake of killing. And then basically, to kind of end anything to deal with with Prince Edric, Oswald Thorne, he plays on the pride factor that his son has and says, well, let me show you what you will inherit one day. I want to show you this great hand-forged armor I have down in the armory. Why don't you come look at it with me? And he takes him down there, and all there is this box. And he says, what? You tricked me. And he says, you are easy to fool, but I have something for you. I heard you heard of this box. And then it's called the Shell of Insanity. So, and he says the last man that was locked in there ate his own face. And Mad King says, to be fair, it was an improvement. I hate explaining jokes, but in this case I shall. If any other person had threatened me like that, I'd publicly execute them for treason. But no, that would make you famous, and I don't want that. I have something else planned for you. But basically, he says, Edric says, maybe I'll go mad in there, and he says, maybe it'll make you a proper thorn at last. Oh, a little going away feast for you. And he reaches into his pocket and stuffs his mouth full of candy corn, and then throws him into the Shell of Insanity. And then Dribbin comes running in and chants a bunch of magic, and it gets wrapped in chains, so he can't get out. And basically, if you touch it, it'll like sap all of your energy away and kill you, which we actually learn from Magister Tassi that an unsuspecting Char touched it in Nolani Academy, where it is in Guild Wars 2, and vaporized.
Yeah.
And again, we get another reference, a nice reference to Zola, and he says, send the box to Istan. My departed wife Zola had a desert island estate there. Let the sun fry what's left of my son's mind. And then tells his servants to go erase any memory of his son from the archives. Just strike him from the record so that this failure will never be able to tarnish Mad King Thorne's memory. And essentially they all go do that, and then they all meet up, and he says, okay, the only people that know of your son are in this room. And then the Mad King kills all of his scribes. And then, then they overtake it. And then he gets attacked by the townspeople. So that's pretty much the story of Mad King Thorne, as far as most of it as we know, I think.
Yeah, up to this point. We don't know if there's going to be more coming out in a couple of days, although I expect there's probably not. This Halloween is mostly focused on the Bloody Prince and kind of what his story was, and maybe setting something up for next year with him. But yeah.
Yeah, the only couple other interesting things I could mention. He does have an invisible pony, Mad King Thorne. Mr. Gumdrops, his noble steed.
Yes.
The invisible pony. And there is an entire mission that was introduced later on, actually in 2012, which, as doing the research, I was shocked to see how many different new missions were added to the game in 2012. that means after 2 months after the release of Guild Wars 2, new Halloween content was added to Guild Wars 1, and one of them is the mission called Mad Little Pony, where you try to track down Gumdrops to prevent him from being defeated by Paolo Joko's elite pony hunting squad.
Oh, God. Oh, that's hilarious.
The Lunatic Court, to talk about them. To be honest, we don't know too much about them other than what their purpose is. There was a costume, a Lunatic Court finery costume that you could get in Guild Wars 1. And we do actually see some of them in the Mad Realm in the Clock Tower, for instance. There's that really annoying one that, like, Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock, swallowed it whole, tail and all, that annoying Asura in the Clock Tower area. So we do see some of them throughout the Mad Realm.
I guess it's actually an interesting point that I really hadn't considered, but it seems like the the Lunatic Court is made up of different races. So I assume that means that they were recruited kind of fairly recently, or at least obviously within the last 250 years. But the original Guild Wars stuff, the original Guild Wars 1 happened before we even knew about these other races.
Yeah, because I doubt he would have had any interaction with the Asura, for instance,
right,
because they were below ground. They had no reason to come to the surface at all. But the other interesting thing is that they're in the Mad Realm with him. Which, does that mean that, like, when he left, some of his members went with him to the Mad Realm? Are these just departed souls that ended up in the underworld, then found their way into the Mad Realm and decided to join the Mad King? We don't really know, but that's what would probably make the most sense. But then again, the underworld really is kind of a human-centric thing. I mean, the Asura believe in the eternal alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Does that mean they still go to the underworld? Because again, yeah, you just blew my mind with that right there. Because that doesn't make any sense why there would be Char and Norn and Asura in the Lunatic Court in the Mad Realm. Which would theoretically, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're dead, but they were there when we were there, and so, like, as soon as you get there, spawn in, basically. So it makes me think that they were already there, which is very interesting. And see, it was interesting, again, to talk a little bit more about the Lunatic Court. There are some notable members from Guild Wars 1. Whether or not we'll see them reappear in Guild Wars 2, I don't know. But there was originally plans to have the Lunatic Court story continue throughout the year. In 2010 is when they were first introduced in Guild Wars 1. But one of the older Massively interviews with some of the devs from Guild Wars 1 had basically said they were planning on having him, the Lunatic Court, partake in more stuff throughout the year. Whether or not that happened, or they just meant like that the war in Kryta with the seal being broken, that kind of a thing. But I don't know. He is one of the only characters in Guild Wars history to have more than one elite skill. In fact, he has 7 elite skills, Mad King Thorne.
Goodness.
He has 4 warrior skills and then 3 special Mad King skills. It's Good to be King, Maddening Laughter, and there was another one, Mad King Pony Support. And this is another thing that I didn't learn about till recently, is there's the challenge mission called Scarred Psyche, which you basically spawn in with a team, and as per challenge missions in Guild Wars 1, you can go in and get gamer points and try to get a higher score to outrank other people in the world. But it's basically Mad King. You spawn in as a candy corn infantry soldier, and you're fighting off Paolo Joko's waves and waves of Paolo Joko's minions. And throughout the whole battle, it's just banter back and forth between Paolo Joko and the Mad King.
That's awesome.
And sometimes it's cheesy things like, let's see. Enough is enough, I shall end this myself, says Paolo Joko, and Mad King Thorne says, Paolo Joko, the scourge of anyone with a nose, joins the battle. I want to personally watch your defeat. And then this is another interesting one. After you defeat Joko, he says, "Curse you, Thorne, I'm going to." And then the Mad King says, "Yes, yes, flood valleys and slave nations. I've heard it all before. I'd like to see you try." And then Joko says, "You'll see. You'll rue the day. Go on, start rueing." This is not the end of Joko. And "You'll see. You'll rue the day. Go on, start rueing" is a reference to Stewie Griffin from Family Guy. But Mad King Thorne saying flood valleys and slave nations, blah, 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 is actually what Joko has done in Guild Wars 2. So foreshadowing to what we learn about from the Movement of the World article for what Joko actually is doing during the events, like what's happening now in Guild Wars 2 time. He's dammed the Ebon River and his undead army is enslaving Ilona. So, interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's Mad King Thorne. Again, I guess we didn't actually describe him at all. He has a pumpkin for a head. Again, probably started off that way just because it was Halloween, but perhaps it has something to do with the way they carved up his body. His face was maybe not savable, so he went with a pumpkin for a head.
Yeah.
And I liked the Guild Wars 2 first time around because he was funny and silly towards the end, but at the beginning he was kind of mean and scary. Like we had to fight him. He's giant. We had to fight him in the Mad Realm, and he was almost cruel and evil, which I kind of liked. And then after we beat him back, then he kind of just returned to his typical Mad King self.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he is actually like that in his own realm. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, and again, Mad King, Wood Potatoes mentioned this in one of his old Guild Wars 2 daily videos about how the potential for Mad King Thorne to drive the story of Guild Wars 2. This is before we knew about the living story, and we had assumed that there would be semi-regular updates, maybe even expansions. But whenever we do get to go to Ilona, we have to fight Joko, and there's the potential that we could ally with the Lunatic Court and Mad King Thorne to then take on Joko because they have this deep-seated rivalry. And that might be the best way to go about it. I mean, if we resurrected Joko from an internal entrapment to defeat Abaddon, why not free the Mad King to help fight Joko? It kind of seems to be up the player character's alley for, way to go about doing things. So
yeah, we'll just get Cormier to help us out with that. We'll be good.
Yeah. Traherne will show up too. Again, we mentioned he has a clock tower. How the clock tower has anything to do with Mad King Thorne, it doesn't actually seem, and the live stream didn't really seem to give us too much information as to what it actually has to do with anything. So I don't really know how the clock tower functions in any way to Mad King Thorne. If he just had a clock tower on his castle, if there's any specific significance to the clock tower itself. But I don't know. There was a couple other meta events that were added during the October 2012 thing, but I don't really think they're worth mentioning. It's mostly to deal with the scavenger hunt. But let's see. Let me just take a look. A lot of the times you were looking around with your candy-powered matter meter, looking around for things. And again, like we said, with the candy corn getting stuffed into the Bloody Prince's mouth, that's probably why candy corn is what you need to help defeat him. If you're doing the Bloody Prince story.
Yeah, that's like his one weakness is
candy corn. And I think the only other thing that's kind of worth mentioning, before we kind of close out. Actually, I guess we should just briefly mention Magister Tassi, the Asura, who's basically devoted her whole life to researching the thorns. That seems to be like her main expertise. Although she did do some interesting things during the Dragon Bash festival. She was around there and she helped with the investigation through that. but she seems to be the world's foremost expert on the Thorne family, and we learn through this most recent living story update with Bloody Prince Edric that she had no idea that the Mad King ever had a son. So I guess the Mad King's scribes did a fairly good job of erasing him from history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the last little thing I wanted to mention, which I think would be amazing, and I'm really sad that they didn't do it, was one of the stories that the devs in the live stream had mentioned that they never got to pan out. Was they really wanted to do the Mad King steals Winter's Day one year.
That would be super cool.
I think that would be perfect. I mean, that's really like how the Grinch stole Christmas right there. And I think that would be amazing if they were to do that. Because, I mean, I loved Winter's Day in Guild Wars 1, and Winter's Day last year in Guild Wars 2 was interesting. But I wasn't, like, Halloween was Halloween last year, and it was amazing. And Halloween this year was kind of a letdown in comparison.
Yeah, that's why maybe they'll do it this year, because they kind of took the focus off of Thorne so much.
Yeah, and they kind of mentioned this in the live stream, and they wanted to build him up because he has the potential to come back, years to come, and he is a fairly the Bloody Prince. I mean, he's a fairly sinister villain, and he is a great villain.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the potential to really, to have future conflict. But the Mad King is he's just classic, and Again, we learned about him through talking to NPCs and finding books and things last year, and it was amazing. And Halloween this year was just kind of like I don't even have all my meta achievements done because I just don't feel like breaking down 20-something more doors. Just doesn't appeal to me. I don't know. But I digress. This is a lore show. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the Mad King Thorne or Halloween or anything before we kind of bring this to a close?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it.
All right then. So, there you have it, guys. Mad King Thorne lore revisited for 2013 with some updates from Guild Wars 2 and Halloween 2013 and 2012. So, for this Lorecast episode, which number I did not look up beforehand, I am Lagwyn.
And I am Bromms.
And we will see you next time.
Yes.
I've a tale filled with horror and gore of a tyrant from days of yore. So lend me your ear and I'll fill it with fear as I sing of the Mad King Thorne. Be afraid of the Mad King Thorne. Thank you. There's an evil beginning to form, like the clouds of a gathering storm. After so many years, he might finally appear. Be afraid of the Mad King Thorne. Be afraid of the Mad King Thorne. Thank you so much. There's an evil beginning to form, like the clouds of a gathering storm. After so many years, he might finally appear. Be afraid of the Mad King Thorne. Be afraid of the Mad King Thorne. Thank you so much.